Hello, listeners and fellow book lovers. Welcome to The Book Snug, a bi-weekly conversational podcast about books and the reading life. My name is Julia.
And my name is Stephanie.
We're a mother and daughter who love reading and talking about books, the ones we adore and the ones we don't. We're delighted you're here, so grab your favorite hot drink or ice-cold beverage and settle in for another cozy, bookish chat.
Hi, Julia.
Hi, Mom.
How are you?
Hanging in. How are you?
I'm good. I took a nap, so now I'm wide awake and ready to record this podcast.
Oh, good.
What are you drinking in the Book Snug today?
Well, I was thinking about this as we were getting ready, that I think this is the second episode in a row where we have not drank tea while we've been in here. I think we did water the last time.
Yeah.
Because I'm drinking kombucha today.
So another good for you drink that's kind of like taking your vitamins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although I do really like how this one tastes.
What's the flavor?
Peach pineapple.
Okay.
And I like peach things. So it's more mellow than I think some of the other kombucha tends to be.
It's definitely peach season. So
it is.
That fits.
It is. What are you drinking?
I am drinking an Izzy drink. It's mango flavor. So it's a soda. It's carbonated, but it's just sweetened with juice. So even though I'm drinking a carbonated drink, I feel like it's still at least a little bit healthful. It's better than drinking Coca-Cola, which I love, but totally wrecks me. So I can't drink it anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I drink Sprite because it helps with some of my stomach issues. But the only time I drink Coke now is if we're out like at a bar or something and I'll get a Jack and Coke. But like we don't keep, I don't know the last time we purchased soda and had it in the house.
Yeah. I can't anymore. My belly doesn't like it.
No, mine doesn't
Even
either.
though my taste buds do.
Getting old is weird like that.
Well, hello, listeners, and welcome to the Book Snug. Today, we're going to be talking about books that take us someplace else, that have a strong sense of place. And when we finish reading them, we feel like we have taken a vacation in our mind to another place in the world. And we thought that would be fun to talk about today because it is summer in the Northern Hemisphere. And summertime around here, at least, people really lean into vacationing and travel. Now, we've been to the beach already. Do you have any other plans for the summer, Julia?
Trying not to melt.
Okay.
But no, we have
You're
no
not
travel
going
plans. The beach was, because it was so early. I mean, that was great. It came sooner, but that means our vacationing was done for the summer.
Yes. My husband and I and our youngest son are headed to Wales in September for a little over a week.
You know what? You need to stop telling me this because I forget about it. And then, life is good. And then you remind me. Now I'm all...
And then life is trash.
Absolutely.
But I live in a perpetual state of wanderlust. So I am always happy to pick up a book that is going to take me someplace new and wonderful.
Well, and as we were growing up, we did some of our biggest travel during the summer.
Yes, because of school. That's the only time you weren't in school.
Right. And so for me, even though I'm married now and don't have my own ability to travel the way I want to, summer for me this is when my desire to go places is a lot more heightened.
Yeah.
Or my places I want to go list gets like exponentially larger.
Yes.
Yeah, summertime it's for me travel.
Okay. So what we've done is we have come up with a very long list of books that have a very strong sense of place, or books where the author has been so descriptive in the place setting that you feel like you have actually been there. And we are going to share them with you. And our hope is that you will find at least one book that you want to pick up and experience and feel like you have been someplace new this summer. To be clear, we're covering a wide variety of settings, a wide variety of genres, and a wide variety of stories. So some of the stories are going to be light and frothy, and some are going to be a little bit heavier with more complicated or heavy themes. So keep that in mind. Like I said, I hope you find at least one book you feel like you want to pick up and read.
And I guess also that on that as well, we are talking about a lot. So we're going to be talking about these books pretty rapid fire.
Yeah.
We're not going to spend a lot of time going into significant detail because as much as I think we could talk about books for hours and hours,
Yes.
we can't. I don't have the capacity to edit a 3-hour podcast.
Right. And really, who wants to listen to that? I mean, seriously. And I think what we need to do is just say where the book is located and maybe a brief little summary of what's going on. Enough to let our listeners know if the book sounds interesting to them or not.
Sure.
Okay, so let's do some armchair travel. Julia, where are you going to take us first?
Old Town Prague.
Ooh, I've never been to Prague.
Oh, well, and that's what's so cool. So this book is Lights of Prague by Nicole Jarvis. It is a vampire story.
Oh, okay. Very good.
I think that's how you would kind of classify these. It's the Eastern European version of a vampire.
Okay.
And vampire hunting. For me, I have been to Old Town Prague years and years and years ago, but a lot of the story does take place in that part of the city. And so it was just a really fabulous journey back into this place that I want to go back to, but don't know when that's going to happen.
Very fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Perfect to read around spooky time.
Okay. So I was going to ask you, are the vampires real folkloric vampires that are scary, or are we talking more like Twilight vampires?
No. These are based off of true Eastern European vampire lore.
Okay.
And a lot of the book does take place at night. So it does have a much darker feeling to it. It's also around the time when there were gas lighters that would go around at night and light the lamps.
Yes.
So it's really evoking that old ancient city kind of Eastern European. Like, I'm probably not describing it the way that I want to, but
like
that
old town.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So perfect. Maybe it feels more perfect for me since I've been there, but that perfect feeling of that part of Prague.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah.
We're starting off strong. I wasn't expecting to have a book I want to read right away, but here we go. I have divided my books into areas of the world, and I'm going to start off in the United States by talking about New York City. The first book I want to share, and Julia, I know you're going to start rolling your eyes before I ever get the title out, is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And the reason I'm picking this book as a good travel book is because it's a lush classic set in Long Island and New York City in the 1920s. So think jazz, think prohibition, think flappers. In this story, we follow Jay Gatsby and Daisy Buchanan, and we follow their love story. We get flashbacks to the past and then what is going on right now with them. The reason I'm suggesting this book for travel is because of the very strong sense of place of the mansion on Long Island and then the time that they spend in New York City. It's just very, very realistic and just you feel like you're there with them. So it's decadent and it's also a tragic story. So beware of that. If you've never read The Great Gatsby, it is quite an experience. Now, I know, Julia, you don't like it. So
Right. And I know that we have this slated to talk about at a later time, but
Yes.
I will agree with you that there is a really strong sense of setting in place in that book.
Yeah. The second book I want to recommend for New York City is Burn, Baby Burn by Meg Medina. Have I brought this to the show before?
You did. I don't remember when, but I remember the title.
It is set in New York City again in the summer of 1977. This is a very historical summer for New York City. It's when the Son of Sam serial killer was shooting his victims. There was an arsonist who was going throughout the city burning buildings down. There was a blackout at one point in the city, and it just felt like the whole urban area was a little bit out of control.
Jeez, what was in the water?
I don't know. And in the midst of this setting, we follow a young girl named Nora Lopez. She's 17. She's just graduated from high school, and she's just trying to determine what she's going to do with herself and the rest of her life. It's a very quick read, very atmospheric, and I really enjoyed it. So those are my two books for New York City.
Okay.
Where are we going next with you, Julia?
Bosnia.
Oh, okay.
So really, I probably should have categorized these a little bit differently.
That's fine. You do you. I'll do me.
Not a ton of brain energy going on up here right now. But my next book is People of the Book by Geraldine Brooks.
Okay. I've never read this, but I do own it.
This is a beautiful story. Really, this book is kind of a split timeline. It focuses around the discovery of the Sarajevo Haggadah, which is a Jewish prayer book. And there are specific things within the book that make it a historical anomaly. And so the conservator that's brought in, making replicas of it or making her notes and everything. And that's happening in Bosnia. But as all of these little fragments of the book are coming out, so there's a butterfly wing or a possible red wine stain or things like that, then you also have interposed the different places that this book could have been that brought those different things into the book. So Venice during Carnival comes out at one point, or Africa happens. And so layered within this very strong sense of Sarajevo at a time of high conflict, you also have interspliced these scenes from other places as well. There's a winter scene right after World War II in Germany. So a really good demonstration of place all throughout the entire book. But I think it kind of anchors in Sarajevo.
It sounds almost like you're doing a world road trip through the book.
Yeah. Oh, it's fabulous. And the writing is magical to begin with. I finished the book and then it just sat like a good dream afterwards, where it just was just all in my thoughts.
Yeah. That's another book I'll have to add to my list. You're batting 1,000, Julia.
Well, we'll see if I continue that. What's your next one?
My next area of the world that we're going to talk about is still in the United States, but it's in the West.
Oh.
So we're talking about anything west of the Mississippi River. The first book I want to talk about is Something Wilder by Christina Lauren. This is a second chance romance, which is a trope that I really enjoy. And it is set in the Red Canyons of Utah. The book centers on Leo and Lily, who were lovers in the past and reconnect accidentally. It's a random reconnection on a team building trail ride that goes very, very wrong. This book is unusual for a romance because the romance does not take center stage. There are other things going on. When I say that the trail ride goes wrong, there's a murder that's committed.
Oh.
And then there's a treasure hunt and survival. So there's a lot of other things going on besides the romance. If you go on Goodreads and look at this book's rating, it's not very high because people who usually read romance didn't like the story arc of this book. It suited me because I like my romance to be like a sideline. I like other things to be going on, so I really like this. But it is just a good, I thought it was fun read. And you get a very strong sense of place. My second book for Western United States is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. Now this book, if you've ever seen it, is a chunkster. It is big and it is epic. It covers a lot of people's lives over the course of several months. You start out in the town of Lonesome Dove in Texas. You meet all these very interesting characters. And then there's a cattle drive that moves cattle from Texas to Montana.
Jeez.
And you follow the characters through that cattle drive. It is epic. It's a love story. There's an adventure. It feels almost like a road trip, actually. And it's incredible. When you finish, you honestly feel like you have traveled right along with these cowboys. And then the accompanying characters. The characters are memorable. It's just fabulous. I can't recommend it enough. Don't let the thickness of the book discourage you if you're interested, because once you start, you will not want to stop reading. Okay.
Yeah.
So Texas and somewhere in Utah, those are my Western books.
What a spread. Texas to Utah. There's a couple other states in between there.
There are.
I'm going to talk about an author next, specifically, instead of a country. And that's because this specific author, I think, has done a good job of being particular about the places that he's talking about. And for all of the controversy, I'm talking about Dan Brown. I know that there are some people who critique his writing, or, I know he's had some fun with religious circles, and I have read most of his books, which is so odd that if somebody were to ask me who is an author that you read everything of, Dan Brown wouldn't come to mind for me.
But it's the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So his book, Angels and Demons, has religious undertoning to it, but it takes place in Rome. So they're going all around Rome on like this high stakes quest to solve some clues to stop things from happening. Inferno takes place in Florence. So you get the major places in Florence, Ponte Vecchio, the Boboli Gardens, Rome. With Angels and Demons, you also get into the Vatican with that as well. Da Vinci Code takes place in Paris. So it starts at the Louvre and then hits some other places around Paris as well. In Origin, that's Barcelona in Spain. So you get some very prominent places within, Barcelona. And then I just finished Deception Point, which takes place in the Arctic Circle.
Okay, that's totally different than the other places you were talking about.
Also different characters. So Angels and Demons, Inferno, Da Vinci Code, and Origin all, are with Robert Langdon. I believe a couple of those are movies with Tom Hanks. Deception Point is a whole other main character. And even though these books are all high stakes, maybe political thrillers or religious thrillers or what have you, I find that Dan Brown, when he's using specific locations, that they are researched, that you can identify all of these locations that he's talking about. He has a couple of editions of his books where there's actual photographs of the places he's talking about, so you can kind of visualize it. Mm-hmm. And when I was in Rome and Florence, I had read Angels and Demons and Inferno at that point, and so I was able to visualize some of the things that he was, talking about in these books. Mm-hmm. So a lot of fun. I will say the Deception Point one in the Arctic, I have an issue with thalassophobia, which is the fear of water, big very oceans of water.
Yeah.
And there is a point where they fall off a glacier into the water. I was reading that late at night and I didn't feel great reading it. There was a lot of dark water in that book and it just was not necessary. Anyway, his books are fabulous for location and kind of traveling.
Yeah, I think Dan Brown gets a lot of flack.
Yeah.
But there are many, many people who say how readable his books are and they're propulsive. There's something to be said for that. I have never read a Dan Brown book, but
I mean, they're predictable. So I know how they're going to end. I kind of know where the twists are going to come. I know I've read enough clearly to be able to identify what's going to happen. But they do read pretty quickly and are pretty propulsive. So,
and predictability is not always a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you want to know exactly what you're getting into when you pick up a book.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, for me, we're still in the United States, but now we're traveling to the Southeast. And this is going to be coastal, Southeast America. The first book I want to recommend is Other Birds by Sarah Addison Allen. This book takes place on a fictional island called Mallow Island in South Carolina. This is a delightful, beachy, little touristy town, and you feel all the beach and touristy vibes. And the characters are charming, and all of the characters pretty much take center stage. There's not one single character that's the main character. All their stories converge by the end, and it's just such a satisfying read. The reason I'm suggesting it here is the setting of Mallow Island is so well developed, and it's just interwoven through the whole story. You feel like you've been there or you've experienced a place like that. So if you're looking for a good beachy vibe that feels very American, this is a good book to read. Then the second book that I would like to recommend for Southeast United States is a book set in Florida. It's called The Last Train to Key West by Chanel Cleeton. It's based in the Florida Keys in September of 1935. And part of the story includes the very famous Labor Day hurricane that pretty much wiped out a lot of the train tracks that ride beside Highway 1 in the Florida Keys. So if you've ever been to the Florida Keys, Route 1 is the overwater highway that gets you from Miami down to Key West. Yeah. But it's just got such a strong sense of place. The hurricane feels very real. The story's engaging. And it follows the lives of 3 distinct women and their experiences during the storm. There's a little bit of love happening, but it's more just about experiencing and surviving one of the worst storms that ever hit Florida.
Okay.
So if you want to go to Florida and experience a hurricane, this is a good book.
I think one of those things is on my to-do list, Mom.
I happen to really love the Florida Keys.
Yeah.
I loved Key West. So this book might just have a special place in my heart because of that. But I just think it is very well written and has a really strong sense of place and an accurate sense of place for the Keys. Where are you taking us to? You seem to be hovering in Europe and I can't get out of the United States. So where are we going next?
I think that that's a good representation of my reading as a whole.
Uh-huh.
My historical fiction reading is Europe. And we are back in Paris.
Okay.
Now, where the Da Vinci Code with Dan Brown is in Paris and the Lou and, kind of center Paris, this book is more cultural Paris. So living in an apartment in Paris, daily life kind of things.
Right. Slice of life Paris.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is Revolution by Jennifer Donnelly. This has some darker themes to it, dealing with grief and depression and things like that. It's also a split timeline. So the main character is a young girl, I don't remember how old she is, 16, 17, 18, in a musical high school who is then spending the summer with her father in Paris.
Okay.
And so doing so and being in Paris, she discovers the journal of somebody who is a young girl about her age who is a prominent figure in the French Revolution. And so then a split timeline starts.
Okay.
There's part of the book that takes place in the French catacombs. They're sitting at the Eiffel Tower at one point. So I just remember that sense of that slice of life of Paris being very, very tangible in this story.
Okay. Sounds good.
Definitely. I would say that if just a caution with reading this story because of how those tough subjects are written.
Okay.
What's next? Later topic, maybe?
Yeah, actually, It is a little bit of a later topic. We're still in the United States, but now we're heading to Alaska. And I'm bringing a book that I've talked about on the show before, I'm pretty sure, and that is The Snow Child by Owens. This is a beautifully written story about a childless couple who move from the contiguous states to Alaska because they've lost a child. And they just want to start a new life. The writer, Owens, lives in Alaska, so she is personally familiar with the Alaskan terrain, the weather, the sensibilities of the Alaskan people, and you can really feel that in this story. There's an incredibly strong sense of place. If you are someone who likes to read something cold in the summertime when it gets really hot, this is a good book to pick up. It's based loosely on the Russian folktale, The Snow Maiden, so it does have a bit of magical realism in the story, but it is just so beautifully written and so captivating. I cannot recommend it enough. This is a 5-star read for me, and it is a great way to visit Alaska.
Yeah, I know you've recommended it to me a number of times, and it's definitely a book I want to read. I just know that it's going to be a book that I need to give some time to. I just don't always have that time to give. So it keeps getting pushed off until I can feel that I can give it the justice it deserves.
I didn't mention a time frame for this, but this is definitely historical fiction. Okay. So you're not talking about Alaska in the current time frame. It's probably early 1900s, I would think. Maybe even a little bit before that. Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay. Are we still in Europe, Julia?
We're not.
Oh,
At least for the time being.
Okay.
The next one it's an autobiography.
Okay.
So
this is probably the only nonfiction that we're talking about?
Probably.
Okay.
Although I did just think of one more, but yes, this is the only one that's currently to talk about.
Okay.
Also a hard subject, so I guess
pick and choose at your
leisure.
Yes.
Not leisure, at your discretion.
Yes, discretion is probably a better word.
Yeah. This one is A Long Way Gone, Memoirs of a Boy Soldier by Ishmael Beah. And this takes place in Sierra Leone. Now, from that title alone, you know that it's going to be a hard book.
Yeah.
And it is very difficult to read. Ishmael Beah he is straight to the point with what his experience was, and he does not kind of shy away from the details. So it's very difficult. There's some, things that he experienced that he talks about that are rather graphic. But I have never been to Sierra Leone. I've never been to Africa. It is a place that Ben and I have talked about doing missions in.
Yeah.
But I have friends who have done missions in Sierra Leone, and they have said that it's just hot and humid, but there's a lot of beauty to it too because of all the lush green and the cultures of the people. And I read this book long before I met those friends, but I remember feeling the setting so much. Sure, the political setting is going to be paramount in this book, but of the heat, but then also the sounds at night, but then also the lush green trees and the feeling of the little villages that they were all at. Yeah, it's a hard book, but he does a very good job of setting you in the place in which his memories happened.
Okay. Does sound like a heavier experience.
Yeah. Please tell me you have a happier book next.
I do. We're heading to the Caribbean.
Oh, good. I need the Caribbean.
I have 2 books for the Caribbean, and they are both romances. I am recommending one that I've talked about, I think, on the show a couple times before, and then a book I just finished reading.
Okay.
The first book is Float Plan by Trish Dollar. This is the story of a young woman whose partner commits suicide right before they planned on taking a long sailing trip through the Caribbean together. So she embarks on the sail on her own and very quickly realizes she can't manage the boat by herself. So she hires a first mate. And then it becomes a strangers or friends to lovers type of romance. And it's wonderful. It's a very slow burn, but the way that the author describes the islands and the experience of being on the ocean and it just is so perfectly Caribbean. I can't even explain well enough how that is.
Yeah.
But if you read this book, you will definitely feel like you have traveled throughout the Caribbean and experienced the uniquenesses of each island. The Layover by Lacey Walden is the book that I just finished. Now, this kind of cracks me up because this book does not get good ratings on Goodreads, but I think it's because it's basically a closed door romance that is a very slow burn, which would exactly be my cup of tea.
What's wrong with that?
But I think a lot of romance readers don't want that. This is the story of 2 flight attendants. And their compatriots or their coworkers, they get stranded in Belize for a weekend because their plane needs mechanical work. So the 2 main characters start off as enemies for particular reasons, and they actually make sense, even though you're kind of frustrated by it.
Sure.
But over the course of the weekend, they decide they like each other a lot more than they thought they did.
Of course. But
you're in Belize. You go snorkeling, you experience the bioluminescence, you meet monkeys. I mean, it's just,
fun.
It's just the perfect Caribbean vacation. It just feels very tropical. Plus, you're following flight attendants flying around the country and down to Belize. You just feel like you're traveling. And I actually appreciated some of the insight into being a flight attendant. So it was just fun. And the other thing is there's not really miscommunication tropes in this book, which I really appreciated. There are other issues. Assumptions are being made, but it's not active miscommunication that makes you want to knock the characters' heads together.
Well, that's good.
Okay, but the setting is wonderful, and you'll really feel like you went on vacation there.
Okay, gotcha.
Are we back in Europe, or are we headed someplace new,
Well,
Julia?
I'm actually going to piggyback off you and go to the Caribbean.
Okay, take us there.
So this is a book that I have talked about before, and that's Island Queen by Vanessa Riley.
Oh, yeah. I do remember this book.
Now, just briefly, this is a fictionalized story. I can't remember the actual word for it. But so this book focuses on Dorothy Kirwan Thomas, who was a real person who lived from the 1700s, I believe, to the beginning of the 1800s. And she was a renowned businesswoman in the Caribbean. She's kind of been forgotten to history and is kind of only really remembered for a caricature or a cartoon that was created of being the king's lover or the prince's lover.
Okay.
Anyway, Dorothy Miss Dolly, if you will, has lots of businesses scattered all throughout the Caribbean. So she's born on Demerara, has some time that she spends in Montserrat, hits Grenada at one point. So she's hitting all of these fabulous islands. And you can just, in the writing, you can feel the atmosphere, the humid air, smell the ocean. At one point, they're up in the not the jungle, the forest jungle part. And you have a sense of how overgrown everything is. My honeymoon was on Grenada, and so I was able to bring that image then as well to the book. But a really fabulous story of a woman who's kind of forgotten, but also a really fabulous journey around the Caribbean as well.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I highly recommend.
And it's a fictional account of her life.
Yes.
It's not an autobiography or a biography.
No, I would compare this in the way that it's written to Marriage Portrait.
Okay.
In that there's very little information known about this woman, so it's an author's attempt to kind of put the pieces together.
To fill out her life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Well, we're moving from the Caribbean to Mexico.
Ooh.
And I have 2 books. The first is a very short classic. So if you feel like you want to upgrade your reading a little bit, I would recommend this one. It's called The Pearl by John Steinbeck. And it's based on a Mexican folktale. It centers on a poor diver. His name is Kino, I think. And he finds a priceless pearl while he's diving in the Pacific Ocean. The story follows the corresponding reverberations from that, and it really focuses on greed, betrayal, and the loss of innocence.
Jeez.
This is a short book with very heavy themes. It's tragic, but the descriptive writing of the setting is superb. You will really feel like you are there, first on the coast, and then there are other places that you travel to in this story.
Sure.
It's a quick read, but I can guarantee that your brain will go back to it often. It's the only Steinbeck I've ever read, and I don't know why, because I actually really like his style of writing. It's very straightforward, but man, can he put you in a certain place and time. The second book I want to recommend is a little bit unusual because it's a fantasy, but it takes place in real Mexico. And that is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno Garcia. It's a quest fantasy based in real 1920s Mexico. You start in the Yucatan Peninsula and you travel all the way to Baja California in this book. A young girl named Cassiopeia Toon accidentally brings a death god back to life.
Oh, I don't recommend.
And he takes her with him as he travels across Mexico to fulfill requirements to regain his throne and defeat his brother. It is such a fun trip. You get fun glimpse into real world Mexico in the 1920s, which is someplace I honestly never imagined before. Plus you get the added benefit of running into all these creatures and people from folklore, and you have the underpinnings of the Mayan mythology. Be aware there is a lot of like references to blood sacrifices because we're talking about Mayan gods, and that was a big thing in their mythology. But the story was great, had a very satisfying ending. And I had a lot to think about when it was done. So you will feel like you traveled across Mexico when you read this book. It's very fun, very satisfying read.
You say fun. Do you mean fun as in like humorous or lighthearted, or fun just as in what they kind of do?
Fun as in the travel experience, the things that you keep coming across and experiencing as you go across the country.
Gotcha. So it sounds like a lighter version of American Gods by Neil Gaiman.
It's this is young adult, so it's definitely going to have a lighter, more superficial feel, I would say. But I hesitate because the ending in particular is not superficial. Okay. It's something that, like I said, I keep thinking about. But it was the type of book I just could not, at the end of the day, wait to pick it up and read it.
Gotcha. Okay.
What's next? Where are we going, Julia?
North Carolina.
Okay.
So some of the books that I'm bringing here at the end are books that we've talked about before. So I will be kind of brief in my descriptions of them. And this next one is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens.
I wondered if you were going to bring it to the show.
I didn't think of it initially, and I think that's because when I think of travel, I think of,
Europe.
right, or other places other than the United States.
Right.
And we visit North Carolina on a pretty regular basis.
Yes.
So even though this particular, place where the book takes place is a place that I've never been, I don't think of that kind of travel. I think of
further away.
Passport adventures.
Yes.
Yeah. Where the Crawdads sing takes place in the marshes in North Carolina, centered around Kaya, who is a young woman kind of left to her own devices in the marshes.
At a very young age.
Yeah. And it's her story of kind of growing up and interacting with society and what her sense of survival means to everybody else. But the nature writing is very good in this book.
Yeah, lush. I would describe it as lush.
Yeah. I could feel in this book the sticky hot summer air. I could hear the mosquitoes, but I could also, I was aware of the love that she had for all of the insects and all of the fish and everything. Very, very good sense of place in where the Crawdads sing.
Yeah. I think too, because Kaya is an artist.
Yeah.
And she focuses on the natural world and her art. That gives an added sense of the place and what she's seeing on a daily basis and experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. Another hard one. I must be bringing all of my hard themed books to the table today. Yeah. I don't know, but a really good sense of the marshes.
Yeah.
Where are we headed to next, Mom?
We are headed to the Mediterranean. Oh. And I want to talk about one author who overall she writes fantastic settings. Mm-hmm. But these two are two of my favorites of hers because they just felt so real to me and they feel very summery because the Mediterranean. Mm-hmm. The first book is called This Rough Magic, and the author I'm talking about is Mary Stewart. She is an older writer, so these would be vintage books, probably 1950s, 1960s.
Sure.
This Rough Magic is a romantic suspense novel set on the sun-drenched island of Corfu. There's love, there's mystery, there's murder, and there are dolphins.
Hey.
There's definitely beach time and boat time, and it's just beautiful. You honestly feel like you have visited the island reading this book. I will say that the speech, the dialogue between the characters is a little bit dated because we're talking about the 1950s.
Sure.
But other than that, once you get going on the story, it's very engaging, very propulsive, and I just absolutely loved it. There's also a connection between the island of Corfu and Shakespeare's The Tempest, and the book talks about that pretty frequently. And I think there are even quotes at the beginning of chapters from the play.
Okay.
So that adds a little bit of an extra fun bit to the story.
Gotcha.
The second book by the same author, Mary Stewart, is The Moon Spinners. And this is another romantic suspense. She wrote a lot of romantic suspense novels. But this one is based on the island of Crete. And it follows a young woman, and she is headed to Crete to spend some time, I think, with her sister or a friend. And she's out walking in the hills and comes across this injured man. And that starts this whole mystery, suspense, murdery kind of story.
Okay.
But in the midst of this gorgeous island, and she describes it as an island with white hills and blue sky and these red bougainvillea against whitewashed hotel walls. Like it is just fantastic as far as descriptions for the island. And again, it's very engaging. The story is interesting and you just want to stay in that place for sure. So those are my Mediterranean reads.
Yeah, listen, the Greek Isles is high on my I want to visit list.
Yeah. Mine too. And this should cover you till you can actually get there.
Right. We looked at going to Santorini for our honeymoon.
Yeah.
Pretty briefly because money.
Yes.
But looking at all of the images of the whitewashed walls against why does travel have to be so expensive?
Well, these books will definitely take you there, at least in your head for a little while.
Okay, I guess I'll have to be content with that.
Where are we headed to next, Julia?
So, okay, this needs a little bit of a disclaimer. I'm talking. The next book is the Discovery of Witches series, And I know I talked about how much I did not like the series. However, the second book, particularly Shadow of Night, has a fabulous sense of place in Elizabethan England.
Okay.
Fabulous place. From the way that the food was set up, to the way that they dressed, to how they traveled, to how they walked through the town. Specifically in London, really incredible setting. And I mean, if I had a time machine, that's a time that I would go back to.
Sure.
So I found that to be a very easy place to believe and very easy to feel that everything made sense that they were putting together. The end of the first book ends in New York at Halloween.
Okay.
And it's Madison, New York specifically, and I was trying to see where that was in connection to the Hudson Valley, but really fabulous descriptions of fall and autumn and Halloween, and I think those two examples are the best setup of place in the entire series.
Okay. So the first and second books.
The end of the first specifically.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, who wouldn't want to go back in time and spend 6 months in England or even then in Paris at that point in time?
Like, we need a time machine. Not only do we want to travel the world, we want to travel time too.
Right. And that machine needs to be able to equip us to travel to fictional worlds as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So we need a fictional world machine as well.
Yeah. We have pretty high demands. Somebody get on it. I mean, if they can invent AI and who knows what else is hidden.
They can take us to Hobbiton for crying out loud.
Or Narnia? Hogwarts? Come on now.
I think we need to do a chapter on fictional places we want to visit.
Absolutely.
Okay. From Elizabethan England, we're traveling to Africa. I have one book. This is a literary fiction pick, and it does deal with a ton of very heavy topics. So warnings there. This book is called The Poisonwood Bible by Barbara Kingsolver. It follows the ill-prepared, fanatical missionary and his family, and they go to the Belgian Congo in 1959. Oh, no. And then you follow them, their family unit, and what's happening around them for 30 years.
Okay.
It is extremely difficult to read, and it is literary fiction. So it's more character-driven than plot-driven. Sure. So just be aware of that. But we're talking about places that you can really experience through the reading, and you will really experience the Belgian Congo in this book. The descriptions are spot on. They're very lush. There's a lot happening. It's a very rainforesty area. Okay. So there's a lot of rain and flooding and humidity. The animals, like the snakes and the things like you're really going to be there in that place. Incredible sense of place with memorable characters and a storyline that is compelling and thought-provoking. You're going to have to gear yourself up. It's not a book that you just pick up on a whim and be like, I'm just going to travel to Africa and see what happens. It's going to take some mental effort, but it's so worth it.
Yeah, it is. I have read the back of that book a couple of times because I think you just have it upstairs. And as good as it probably is, and as, fabulous as it is to read and think about it and reflect on it, I know that this is a book that would be like, oh, this sounds so good. And I would put it on my shelf, and years and years and years and years and years would go by because I can't get myself geared up to read it.
Yeah.
Like I have a book about Auschwitz and women in Auschwitz that's the same premise, that it sounds really good, but I just can't get myself to get there. And so it it's probably like The Snow Child too, in that like I want to read it, I want to give it the justice it deserves. I want to, but I just, when I know that stuff is coming, I'm very guarded.
This is a very different book from The Snow Child. The Snow Child is, I almost said it's an enjoyable read. It's not heavy.
Yeah.
I mean, this book talks about post-colonialism and racism and just the misguided efforts of certain missionaries, and just as a Christian too, it really forced me to do some deep soul searching about how we reach out to people and share our faith without expecting them to make all the changes.
Right.
It was just a very, very thought-provoking but good read. And like I said, you'll feel like you lived in Africa for 30 years.
Yeah. Someday.
You don't have to read it, Julia. It's just a suggestion.
No, I know. I know. Someday I probably will, but that is not today.
I know people, this is their absolute favorite book of all time.
Which, I mean, given the topics that you talked about, I'm not surprised.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have a lighter book for us?
Well, it's a shorter book.
Okay. Well, that's always good too.
Yes. And now we are headed to India.
Okay.
This book is titled 5 to 1 by Holly Badger. This is a very interesting book to read because it's set in a near future India where there are 5 men to 1 girl.
Okay.
And specifically in higher class Indian families, there are contests put on, and whichever man wins that contest marries the girl.
Wins a girl.
Yes.
Okay.
So the book is taking place as our main character. It's told both from the girl's perspective, but then also a guy's perspective in the form of poetry. Back and forth and back and forth. Okay.
So it's a novel in verse.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Love those.
Really interesting look at how, I don't want to say legalized birth rates, but encouraged, right? Whoever's held in higher
esteem,
regard, more women or whatever, how that has effect later down the road in terms of marriage rates or whatever. I remember very clearly this book being hot. Like
it felt hot.
The temperature of what you expect India to feel like.
Yes.
They're in their fancy saris and their fancy dress, and people are sweating because some of the tests in this big contest involve physical skill. The guy, I think the beginning of his story takes place in a farm, so you're getting all of the components of that. Apart from, being appreciative of a culture that I don't tend to read a lot of or have never visited.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the sense of place in this book. I thought was a high, almost as high as the characters.
As far as enjoyment?
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe not enjoyment, but in how the sense of place and how it was written is as integral to the characters because that's why the characters are where they're at, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. I think I read this book in a day. Really, really enjoyable.
It does sound interesting.
Yeah.
I like that kind of dystopian, speculative type of book.
Yeah. I thought the characters were easy to get behind, and I agreed with how it ended. Highly recommend.
We are going from India to the Pacific Ocean. Okay. And I have 2 books I would like to talk about. The first one is The Night Tiger by Yan Shi Chu. It is set in 1930s Malaysia, and it follows 2 characters whose story arcs eventually merge, which is what you would expect. It contains magical realism, which is very present, as well as folklore, and there is a mystery component to this story. It's one of those books that's extremely complex in the plot line, and it's very hard to explain. So this is the one time I'm going to read the Goodreads synopsis, just one little bit. Goodreads describes it as propulsive and lushly written. It explores colonialism and independence, ancient superstition and modern ambition, sibling rivalry and first love. Braided through with Chinese folklore and a tantalizing mystery, this novel is a page-turner of the highest order. And it does contain something called a were-tiger, or there is a hint that there's a possibility there's a were-tiger, which is kind of like our werewolf. Yeah. Only in Malaysia, people who can change into tigers, not wolves.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. There's a lot going on, but the setting is just incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say, as we were talking, I was surprised that we hadn't brought up any books yet from the South Pacific or China or Japan. And so I'm glad you threw one in there.
Yeah, this is Malaysia.
Yeah.
And the one character is a young woman. She's probably late teens. She's a seamstress and she actually gets paid to be a dance partner.
Oh.
Which is very taboo in her culture at the time. Okay. If you're like a dance partner, you're kind of easy, which isn't true, but that's just
Sure, that was the culture.
That how people look at her. And so you follow her. It's kind of like almost like a coming of age for her. She
Okay.
makes some decisions.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
works toward being the woman she wants to be. But there's
Sure.
just a lot going on, and I loved it. It's delightful. Very fairy tale-esque.
Okay. And I don't know a ton about Chinese mythology either.
I don't either. So it was just a good experience all the way around.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
My second book is, I put it under the Pacific Ocean, but it's like a world road trip.
Okay.
It's called Miss Benson's Beetle. It's by Rachel Joyce, who wrote The Unlikely Pilgrimage of Harold Fry, if anyone is familiar with that book.
Okay.
In Miss Benson's Beetle, we have two women, Margaret Benson and Enid Pretty. They're about as different as you can possibly be. Margaret is very no nonsense, no makeup, just barrel ahead with the plans you make.
Okay.
And Enid is a very ladylike woman. She likes her pink toenails and her pom-pom sandals and her outfits that match.
Okay.
These two very different women travel across the world to look for the elusive golden beetle in New Caledonia. And you just follow them on their trip. It's funny, like belly laugh funny in some places. It's very endearing, heartwarming. I actually cried. So it's just a fun book, but you are traveling the world. You take a cruise on the ocean. You are living in this jungle in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's fun. And I just really had a good time. It's a book that I rated okay. I think I gave it 4 stars, maybe. But I keep thinking about it, and I think I would rate it higher if I took the time to rate it again.
Sure.
So I recommend that one too.
Okay.
That is Miss Benson's Beetle by Rachel Joyce.
Okay. Sounds good.
Do you have any more books for us?
Yes. So my final book we've definitely talked about before. And that is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony. I always say his name
Dorr.
Dorr. Okay. I don't know. This is a book that how do you even... it centers around 2 people, Werner and Marie Leray. Werner is from Germany. And Marie Leray is a blind girl living in Paris with her father right around the beginning of World War II. Dad works he's a key keeper. Yeah. At the Paris National Museum of History, the National History Museum. And long story short, there ends up being a stone that the Nazis really want. And so duplicates are made and sent out with a couple different people from the museum. And
he carries one of those stones.
Yes. Marie Leray's father carries one of them. And so they escape Paris and they end up in St. Malo, which is a little oceanside town. And I should have looked where it's at in Paris, but it's only
ocean. Not in Paris. It's on the
France. Yes.
Yeah, on the coast of France.
Yes. And they're there for a number of years. Well, a good period of time.
Yeah.
The descriptions in this book make St. Malo very tangible. The cobblestone roads, the sounds of the ocean, the smell of the ocean.
The seashells.
Yes, the seashells.
Yeah.
I remember specifically how the small community was set up in their relationship with each other. So it felt like a small knit community. There is a doorway that Marie Leray finds that opens up into not the ocean, but it's like a place where ships would have come in or something. And you feel the algae and the seashells and the sounds of the water and really fabulous descriptions of a little place in France that I never would have known diddly squat about.
Right.
And so now it is on my to visit places. And it's also a pretty big place regarding World War II anyway, which I never would have known anything about.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember how vividly that little town was described. It was amazing. I felt like I had been there.
Yeah.
I still feel like I could draw some of the places.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it would be 100% wrong.
That is such a gift to be able to write like that.
Yeah. Well, and I was just thinking too, I wonder if the descriptions are as clear as they are because he was being purposeful in writing with senses other than sight.
I was
because
just
of
thinking
Marie
the same
Leray.
because she can't see. Yeah. Which makes it that much more vivid for us who do have eyeballs that can see. We're experiencing the town through all of our other senses as well. Yeah, I think that's very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any last ones you want to share with the class?
I do. We're going to end up in Great Britain. It's my only real foray into continental Europe, I think. And I want to talk about The Shell Seekers by Rosamund Pilcher. This is also an older book. I'm thinking it came out in the 1980s, maybe 1990s. It's the story of Penelope Keeling's life, which she lived on the coast in Cornwall and in a townhouse in London.
Okay.
So you have these two different places that are very well described. And you follow basically her life. You meet her when she's an older woman. She has 3 children who do not get along with each other. But there's a second timeline of her younger life, lived with her parents and then on her own.
Okay.
And the sense of place, especially in Cornwall, is very vivid. It's another place I feel like I actually visited because of this story. Rosamund Pilcher just does such a job of evoking an atmosphere and a feeling or a vibe in her books. And this one is just perfection. I absolutely loved it. It's a saga. It's the story of one person's entire life. And it's tied to a painting that her father made that she's in as a child called The Shell Seekers. So it's just very, very good. If you like stories that follow a single person through their entire life, this is the type of book you would want to read because it's so good. And the setting is just very, very vivid.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's a lot of books.
Yeah, we've kind of been all over the place.
Right. There are places I wish I would have had more books to talk about, but
I agree.
This is a good start.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we were talking before we started recording. I've been noticing recently that I don't read any books from authors from like Asia. So like I don't read any Japanese authors or Chinese authors, or I don't think we had any books here from the Middle East or around that specific part of the world.
Or South America. The South America, the Middle East are probably my 2 areas that I'm missing the most. I do read Asian writers pretty frequently.
Sure. And I just think I just haven't gotten into those yet. Or, you know, we didn't even have New Zealand or Australia on here.
I just couldn't put all the books I wanted to. I had books for Australia and New Zealand and Tasmania. I did have books based there.
And as we've been talking, I've thought of like 5 or 6 more books I could have added to the list, including one for Australia. Okay. Well,
maybe we'll have to do a part 2.
Yeah, we will.
I definitely could do like a mini show just based on cozy mystery series that really have a strong sense of place. I didn't even bring those to the show, but I have many.
Yeah. I mean, cozy mysteries can happen just about anywhere. So
they can. And when you do have a strong sense of place, that really adds to the enjoyment of the reading.
Yeah, this is true. It does. Well, friends, thank you for hanging out with us while we've talked about all of these different places around the world. I hope that, you know, some of these sounded exciting. Or do you have others that you would put in these places? Have you read any books that would fill in the gaps that we missed?
Yeah, that's what I want to know.
Yeah. Like Canada. Any books about Canada?
Right.
Or Hawaii? Listen, so the list could keep going.
Yeah. Russia?
Yeah. Yeah. Next chapter, we will be talking about memorable books from elementary school, read to us specifically by our teachers.
Yes, after recess.
Yes.
You know that time when you sit on the rug and your teacher pulls out their book.
And you're a little sleepy after lunch and running around. And yes. And we figured this was a good segue into school starting.
Yeah.
So I know that we have a bunch of good books we'll be bringing to that.
I definitely do.
Yes. We thank you so much for sharing part of your day with us today. And we hope that you join us in the next chapter.
Bye, friends. Thanks so much for spending part of your day with us. We'd love for you to continue today's conversation at the Booksnug_podcast on Instagram and at the Booksnug podcast on Facebook. All of our episodes can be found wherever you listen to podcasts, as well as at our website, thebooksnugpodcast.buzzsprout.com, where show notes for every episode can be found. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at thebooksnugpodcast@gmail.com.
As C.S. Lewis, one of our favorite authors, famously said, "You can never have a cup of tea large enough or a book long enough to suit me," and we wholeheartedly agree.